My name is Ken Monaghan. My mother was a sister of James Joyce, and therefore I am a nephew of the man. Some 4 years ago, I started to conduct walking tours on the north side of Dublin. The north inner city is the place where the Joyce family lived for the last 11 years that James was in Ireland, from 1893 until 1904. This is Belvedere College, where it's a Jesuit school, and this is where Joyce got most of his secondary education. He was educated free of charge by the Jesuits because his father couldn't afford the fee. This is Eccles Street, which some people regard as being the most important address in modern literary history. Number 7 Eccles Street would have been just across the road from us there, and that's where James Joyce placed Leopold and Molly Bloom. They lived in number 7 Eccles Street. And I don't know if you remember, but the opening words of chapter 4 of Ulysses, where we meet Leopold Bloom for the first time, and I like to recite it because I get pleasure out of it. Don't know about anybody else. Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowl. He liked thick giblet soup, nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust crumbs, fried hen cod's roes. But most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate the fine tang of faintly scented urine. This is the basin, or the city basin officially known. It was at one time a reservoir which supplied water to the houses on part of the north side of Dublin. It's no longer, for many years, it hasn't been used as a reservoir. It's now just a little park, a little known park as well, in the heart of this built-up area. In Joyce's time, it had ceased to be a reservoir, but Joyce would have known it well. He would have walked through that gateway there on his way through to Eccles Street, and he uses it as he used most places in Ulysses.
My name is Frank McDonald, and I'm the environment correspondent of the Irish Times. I was born in Dublin, grew up on the north side of the city, but about 15 years ago I moved over to the south side, like many people do, and bought this house in Casimir Road. It's an Edwardian end-of-terrace house with 4 bedrooms, and it was built in about 1907. It is, I suppose, inner suburban. I mean, it's not the outer suburbs. It's closer to the city. I've written so much about the city in the last 12 years or so that I really think that those of us who believe in its future should be living right in the very middle of Dublin. I suppose in a way this is perhaps maybe slightly too suburban, even for my taste. We're standing on the Halfpenny Bridge, which was built in 1815, and which is called that because they used to charge a toll of a halfpenny to get across it. In a way, it's become the symbol of Dublin, the bridge itself, the form of the bridge. And it's also located, obviously, on the Liffey Quays, which are, to me, the essential Dublin. If you think of the Seine in Paris or even the Thames in London, you haven't got the same relationship between the city and the river here as you have in those other cities. The property here, the buildings along the quays were allowed to fall into decay, derelict sites developed and so on over the last 50 years even. And very little development took place on the quays. And you've ended up with situations like this, where after 20 years of relentless property speculation, the area has been reduced to ruins. A number of buildings on the quays have been renovated in recent times. The most spectacular, of course, is the Custom House. The Custom House is probably the most important building of late 18th century Dublin, and it now looks absolutely spectacular. But in the context of the Custom House has been substantially altered in the last 30 years. So that when you look at the Custom House now, the dome of the Custom House from the Halfpenny Bridge here, it's almost consumed, by the developments that have taken place around it. Behind us here are the civic offices, the headquarters of local government in Dublin. I know it seems hard to believe, but it's the truth. They're known by the people of Dublin as the bunkers at Wood Quay. And I suppose it's obvious. They looked like the bunkers that the Germans built around the coast of continental Europe during the Second World War. At one stage in 1978, 20,000 people marched through the streets of Dublin to protest against this project. And the bureaucracy that runs the city still managed to get its way and build these buildings in defiance, really, of the people's wishes. They are certainly the ugliest buildings in the city. And what does that say about the attitude of the local authority, that they would house themselves in buildings like this and, as it were, dig themselves in their bunkers against the city? We're here in the Temple Bar area of the city, which is right in the heart of Dublin. And it's a tremendously evocative part of the city. It's full of tremendously varied collection of buildings and all sorts of different uses, like art galleries and restaurants and, second-hand clothes shops and all the rest of it. And for years, since the mid-1970s, it was threatened with demolition. Right here where we're standing, they were going to demolish the whole lot and replace it with a new central bus station, with an office development and shopping malls and all this kind of stuff, in the worst sort of 1960s comprehensive redevelopment. But instead of demolishing every building as they bought it, they made it out on short leases to people who opened up these restaurants and art galleries and all sorts of things in the place. And suddenly the area came to life, and people realized that there was something special about Temple Bar. And now there's a very strong commitment on the part of both central and local government to preserve the area, to renew it, to fill in the derelict sites that still exist here, to bring people back to live in the area as well. They're talking about the possibility of having 2,000 people living in the Temple Bar area within the next 5 years, which is a tremendous thing to do in the centre of Dublin.
Around 1984 and 1985, we came into the area and I was in a band. We needed rehearsal space, so we decided to, with myself and some friends, decided to build rehearsal studios. That flourished because of the fact that there was so many bands around that needed rehearsal space. Also because of the fact that U2 became a world phenomenon, brought about a heightening awareness that there was a need for more services in the music industry. So we expanded the rehearsal studios and we got an extra building from the transportation company that were going to develop all of this area into a transportation network. So that's why we were able to lease buildings at a really low rent, because we were giving short-term leases. So this is Sun Studios. There are some of the artists that have been recording here. This is just a relaxing room. This is the live room where we record the musicians. And in here is the control room. It's a 24-track machine, 24-track desk. It's computerized. And we try run it on a low-budget, high-quality recording studio. We've had everybody in here from like the Waterboys to Something Happens. All of the Irish bands that have been contracted and have become successful have come through the recording studio. So you've seen the Temple Inn studios and the recording studios, which is called Sun Studios. This is called the Sound Training Centre. It's a training facility that was opened in 1987 to higher the standards of the music industry in Ireland. We introduced two types of courses. One, the recording course, which is a 12 to 16 week full-time recording course, and the other course is a live sound and stage production course. In this lecture room, we have guest lectures in from the music industry. We've had people like from Daniel Lanois, the producer, to Elvis Costello, giving lectures on SSL desks. So I am now bringing you into Temple Inn Studios, which is full of rehearsal rooms. We would have about 20 different types of rehearsal rooms with various types of equipment. We would use these facilities for various types of bands, from rock bands through to pop bands to Irish traditional folk music. The band that I'm bringing you into now is a young and up-and-coming Irish rock group called Moby Dick. And this is, as I said, one of the rehearsal rooms.
1, 2, 3.
Quickly. Project Arts Centre is the first arts organisation to move into this area, the Temple Bar area. It
has been up until now, and indeed remains for the moment, largely abandoned and neglected, though that is changing and changing fast. The project was founded in 1966, and from the beginning our determination was that we would bring here into the city centre the life and the excitement and the buzz of innovative, progressive arts, both theatre and music and visual arts, galleries and sculptures and so on. So over a quarter of a century, we've been the place in Ireland that has tried to look outwards, to try to escape from the provincialism of Irish culture and from the countryside kind of atmosphere. We are the first place that's been looking towards Europe, that's been looking towards young people. We're the place, for example, in which the band U2 were discovered, and hundreds of other artists in all of the disciplines, in the gallery and in the theatre, have had their first step into learning their career, building their abilities and talents. Here in the theatre, we have 160, 170 seats, and we turn around shows approximately every 2 to 3 weeks. Of these, about a half to 2/3 will be new Irish writing, and in many cases there'll be plays performed by people who will go on, who get their discovery here and will then go on to be famous in large international theatres or even in the movies. For example, Gabriel Byrne started out here in Project Arts Centre. We have a long list of people who have discovered themselves here. We open ourselves out to being available as a resource. We're the place where you can try out, you can either succeed or fail, and that makes us very distinct from other venues like in theatre, say the Abbey Theatre. We are the place for experimentation.
She was trying to say that earlier, and she just wants to know the different, just, you know, what I think it's about like sort of like, you know, scrolling back, sort of like your show.
Well, we've just come down the road now, a few hundred metres from Project Arts Centre. We're in one of our colleague organisations in the Temple Bar Gallery and Studios. They were founded in 1983, and they're run as a workers' cooperative. Upstairs in all the studios, there are 32 artists living and working, well, not living, but working and painting all their work. And down here, we have a gallery which is open to the public all day, which shows not only work from the artists that's produced here, but also they do exhibitions of other Irish artists and from overseas as well. I live right in the city centre on the north side, just beside the Bassin. I choose to live here, first of all, because it's very convenient. It takes me 2 minutes, 3 minutes on my bicycle to go into town, and it takes me another 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes in all to get from here to work, although we're on the other side of the river. The neighbourhood is quiet, it's very settled. These houses were built in about 1910 for the workers on the railway station, the Broadstone station, which closed down a few years ago. And slowly now some of these houses are coming up for sale, and people like me are moving in. It's a safe, quiet environment to live in, and it's getting quite clean now because they've stopped the burning of coal in the city centre. So now the city centre is a good place to live. It used to, until a few years ago, be a bad place to live. Now it's the place where people are coming to live, and I'm really happy here. I bought my house last week.
This is Kilmainham Jail. It was established in 1796 as a criminal prison, but almost immediately it became a political as well as a criminal prison. It housed the leaders of our rebellion, the 1916 Rising, which was the revolution that started the establishment of the Irish Free State. It was the housing here in Kilmainham Jail that brought a lot of suffering to the men. It was here that they were executed, and in a few moments we'll go and see their execution point. This is the 1916 execution yard. It was in this yard that the men from the 1916 rising were executed. The reason that this yard was chosen is that there's no way you can see in or out of this yard. It is completely isolated from the rest of the prison. The cross marks the execution point of the 1916 leaders, not their burial point. The men were blindfolded and a ribbon was placed over their heart. They were given the tribute of being brave soldiers. They had put up a brave fight. There was the longest rising ever against the British. This was the cell of Padraig Pearse. It was in this cell that he was held from the time of his court-martial until his death sentence was passed in the Stonebreakers yard. In the cell next to him was his younger brother, Willie Pearse. He had no idea that his brother was imprisoned next to him. He wrote a letter bidding farewell to his younger brother from this cell.
So my piece of work here is called Caught in a State. And what I have done is got a bed of straw and a baby embryo pig. And the pig is lying under a green light, which is the colour of the Irish nation. The idea is about freedom, or the question of freedom, or whether or not, in fact, we have freedom in Ireland as a country. And my attitude was that the British treated us like pigs, but also that there was an awful lot of mixture of attitude between the Irish and the English as to whether or not we actually did act like pigs. So on the bed of straw we have this embryo and the door of the cell is open. So it's about a freedom, but it's a questionable freedom as to whether that attitude or action of the pig has died or whether it's a birth of some continuous pig. So the invitation for this exhibition came from the Project Art Centre, which is a gallery here in Dublin. And the initial idea was that 20 artists would respond to the history of this place, Kilmainham Jail, which was the centre of the Civil War in 1916, and that we would apply ourselves in some way to confront the idea of national identity. So most artists actually did do installation works for the cells, and some artists just adapted their work to hang in the central area. So we're actually on a peninsula here in the middle of Dublin Bay in this Docklands area, and I was born in Cork in the south of Ireland and then studied in the United States and England and returned in 1983. And in the beginning I found it very, very difficult to work because it's very difficult to get spaces to work in this city. Even though there are many, many derelict buildings, developers are not keen to get artists into them. So it was luck that I got permission to work here, and I actually pay rent to the ESB, which is the Irish Electricity Supply Board. So I travel about 4 miles from my home to the pump house every day. So this building is the old pump house that cooled the turbines of the boiler house, and it's my studio. I've worked here for 1.5 years. It's quite rudimentary, and I've had to put up plastic to stop the birds shitting on my work and the drips coming through the ceiling. But basically, it's a wonderful space. It's 150 feet long and continues right down, as you can see, to the other end there where I store my work. And I've managed to take lots of bits and pieces out of the other parts of the buildings that I store here to work on for further projects. This power station was the second power station ever built in Dublin, and the boiler house is the main building. I find them very, very powerful and exciting buildings still, and I keep thinking that they should have been possibly used as a museum of modern art instead of the Royal Hospital Kilmainham's. I think it's a real shame that it is actually going to be knocked, and the bricks already have been speculated for, and they might possibly be sold when the whole thing is knocked down.
The Irish Museum of Modern Art opened in the Royal Hospital building at the end of May this year. It's one of the major events of the City of Culture year in Dublin. The Royal Hospital is the finest 17th century building in Ireland, the first classical building in Ireland. And there was some controversy initially about the idea of founding a Museum of Modern Art in such an historical building. In fact, in our view, there is no more appropriate building within Dublin in which to establish a museum with the function that this museum and many other museums will have to have in the 1990s and into the 21st century. And that is an engagement with history, identity, and a sense of place and locality. The site for the building is about a mile from Dublin city centre, and that was also perceived initially as a problem. In my view, it's a great advantage to be part of a neighbourhood and a community rather than disconnected in the city centre. I think it's got to do with how one sees contemporary and modern art and what its function is. It's also very important for Irish artists to have access to the material that we will show here from international artists and to have access to that at first hand. It's crucially important, particularly for younger Irish artists, that they think of themselves as working in the world. And that we're able to develop exhibition programs and acquisition programs which demonstrate that fact. There hasn't been a Museum of Modern Art in Ireland in this century. This is the first such museum, and the paradox of it being established in such an historically important building will be part of the subject of our work in the future with Irish and with international artists.
National School, Meads Yard, the Hazard. Only two there now, nodding, full as a tick. Too much bone in their skulls, the other trotting round with the fare. An hour ago I was passing there. The Jarvies raised their hats. A pointsman's back straightened itself upright suddenly against a tramway standard by Mr. Bloom's window. Couldn't they invent something automatic so that the wheel itself, much handier? Well, but that fellow would lose his job then. Well, but then another fellow would get a job making the new invention.
For the past 2 years I've been reading Ulysses, and we study, I suppose, about 4 pages every week. And I think we'll be going on for about another 2 or 3 years. We're about halfway through at the moment. So it'll take a long time, and every week we just read a few pages and then read it over again and try and get as much as we can out of it. We really enjoy it. It's just for the fun, I suppose. An anti-Semitic Christian to protect his place in the village. The pointsman's back straightened itself upright suddenly against a tramway standard by Mr. Bloom's window. I think we had this one before. And the pointsman was the man who actually changed the points on the tram lines. So the trams could either go, this would be the tram lines, they go up Westland Row or else go along what's now Pierce Street. Mr. Bloom thinks, couldn't they invent something automatic so that the wheel itself, much handier, a practical bloom, trying to think of a device for the wheel itself, kind of tripping the points. Well, but that fellow would lose his job then.
Mr. Blue was seeing both sides of the question.
Oh, yeah, so it's a classic example. Well, but then another fellow would get a job making the new invention. Always very balanced.
It's essentially a book about Dublin, and it's a book about somebody. It's a book about the world, really, but it's centred in Dublin. We live in Dublin, and it's an ideal opportunity, an ideal place to come together with a small group of people from Dublin and from around the world and come and study the book.
It's amazing. Sometimes in one night we might just read 4 pages and we go back over every line in that, and it's actually great fun, and that's why I come, because everybody contributes their own ideas about what the thing means, and some of them of course are very expert on this, and we all know a little bit about Dublin anyway, so it all adds to a sum of knowledge.
It's a evocation of a time that's gone. It's a view of life, an understanding of relationships and people.
And the language is wonderful as well.
Yeah. And full of humour.
So I suppose, well, Joyce, of course, is the the quintessential Dublin writer. He is Mr. Dublin, and people tend to forget sometimes that Dublin is actually the birthplace of so many famous writers: Yeats and Shaw and Wilde and O'Casey and blah 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 blah. There's so many of them. And so it was decided eventually that there would be a museum to all the Dublin writers. And so in a few months' time, we're going to be opening a magnificent building, a Georgian building, up on the north side of Dublin, and there's plenty of space in it. There's going to be room for exhibitions and lectures and readings and audio visuals and all sorts of things. And we hope to collect material relating to all these writers, things they owned, manuscripts, first editions, all the things to bring these people to life so that people can come to Dublin and see what it is that made Dublin so famous for its writers, all together under one roof.
The comparison made with any Dublin writer is obviously with James Joyce, but in some ways it's unfair in that the Dublin which I grew up in, the Dublin here of Finglas, has more in common with a suburb of Belgium or a suburb of Germany than with the Dublin of James Joyce in 1904 in Ulysses. For too long, Irish writers were burdened by seeing Dublin as a city crystallised in Joyce's past. But a new generation of Irish writers have come along from the suburbs of Dublin, and often from the working class, who have begun to explore their own societies and their own country, which is the country of today, which is the country of Finglas and Tala and Ballyfermot and Blanchardstown. And this is the living city of Dublin, not the streets of James Joyce. This is an old ruined church in Finglas where most of my novels, like The Journey Home and Woman's Daughter, are set. All the characters in these novels at some stage always come here. And to me it's important because it's a juxtaposition between the past and the present. This is a very, very old, hundreds-of-year-old graveyard in the heart of a new place, a place where only green fields was 25 years ago. And in some ways they're coming here searching for roots, searching for a past that doesn't exist. In some ways they're from a marginalised society and they have to create their own pasts and their own myths. In the novels, I've always used forms like thriller forms and murder forms because I've tried to relate to cinema, which is the art form that they as young people will be most familiar with, and I've tried to bring their world into those cinematic forms in the books. Okay. Mind your head. Mind your head. Relax. Although, like every young Irish writer or young Dublin writer, I'll claim that I do not live in the shadow of James Joyce or anybody else. Dublin, unfortunately, is a very, very small city. When I wake up every morning and look out the back window at my back garden, the first thing I see is James Joyce's old house, where he set parts of Portrait of the Artist as a young man. The reality is that Dublin, although the capital of Ireland and a very literate city, is a very small city, and no matter where you go, you're going to keep bumping into people.
Started out with our kids, we all hung around together in the same neighbourhood from the north side of Dublin, and just got interested in music, and we started a band from there 5 years ago. And it's been a hard struggle, but it's been worth it, because all the work you put into it now is starting to come true. We're starting to see what the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? That's basically it. Just we got together as kids and said, let's go for this. All went to lessons, learned and instruments, and started kicking around. Released 2 singles, which done very well, and our third, which is out now, as he said, is well happy. So we're fairly happy.
I'm Ian Wilson. I'm a radio producer in 2FM, which is the national pop station of RTE, the national television and radio broadcaster in Ireland. Essentially, it started in response to the pirate radio stations, and like many other people in our station, I also worked in pirate radio. Since then, of course, commercial radio has happened in Ireland, but 2FM, our station, has been the dominant station in the development of pop music in Ireland since 1979, and we follow a station policy of 1 in 4, 25% of all our music output must be Irish.
Now it's time for number 3 of the 4 numbers altogether tonight from this week's brand new session recorded here in 2FM. It's a band from Dublin. That's The Third Stone, a song written by Fergal Andrews, Eric Ring and Wayne Sheehy, and that's called Here Comes Love. One more to go from them before the end of the programme. OK, it's nearly 24 and a half minutes past the hour of 9 o'clock. It's Dave Fanning on 2FM every Monday to Friday between the hours of 8 and 10. Here's a Liverpool band called The Real People.
We are unique in Ireland in that bands can expect to get airplay relatively early in their career, which is extremely unusual, because in most countries access to national airwaves is very, very difficult, and it usually requires having material released on vinyl or on compact disc. In our case, our national programme, presented by Dave Fanning, which runs 5 days a week, and indeed other programs play material on tape, demo material from bands. And the upshot of that is that you could be a band and you could be 16 or 17 years old and you could make your first tape and you might have it played on a national rock program.
Jesus says he loves me, I ain't sure about that. Age is gonna kill me, knock me over and lay me flat. I could do it some ambition, I could do it something new. A little change in my position, something to look forward to. Jesus says he loves me. It's the politics of passion, hypocrites of fashion. The more of you it takes, the more money that it makes. I don't wanna be on Vogue, 'cause I ain't got the clothes. I'd rather have a party, play some real rock and roll. Jesus says he loves me.
Hello, Hot Press. Hi, who do you want to speak to?
Yeah. Well, I'm a musician myself, but I'm also editor of Hot Press, which is a rock and roll paper founded in 1977. I felt that there was a need for a magazine which dealt with youth culture, and it was always the ambition of the paper that we'd cover more than just music. That we'd also cover the social and political changes in this country and put the music in that wider framework. Conditions in Ireland have been pretty tough over the last decade or so. There has been a huge level of emigration. Up to 200,000 people have left the country for Australia, America, Britain. And a lot of those people would have been from our core readership. A lot of young people leave school, and given that unemployment is so high, given that job opportunities here are so few, there seems to be, in many cases, no option but to leave. As a result, perversely, I think that's a good climate for music. And I think that the high level of unemployment has contributed to a situation where people are much more willing and have the time and the motivation to go about the process of making music, and it has resulted in a level of energy and excitement and ideas in rock music in Ireland, which I think is fairly unique in the European and even in a global context.
Mountjoy Square is one of the three great Georgian squares in the city, and in terms of its proportions, the relationship between the buildings, the height of the buildings and the central space, it's probably the best of the three squares. But because it's on the north side of the city, property values are very low, and it's been in serious decay for the last 20 years or more. You end up with situations like this where Georgian houses are being used as discount electrical shops. You have derelict sites, gaps, I suppose having a mouthful of broken teeth. Because property values are so low on the north side of the city, even these recreated Georgian houses, which actually look like Georgian houses, but in fact it's just an office block, the rents are too low. And in this particular case here on the corner, somebody started building this mock Georgian office block in the 1970s and just simply gave up because it couldn't be justified. It's impossible to get the kind of rents that would be required to sustain that kind of investment. Merrion Square is the biggest of the Georgian squares in Dublin. It was the most fashionable area to live in the 18th century, in the 1780s, 1790s and so on. And it has very fine Georgian houses, beautiful plasterwork interiors and all the rest of it. But from the 1950s onwards, people drifted out. The houses stopped being used as houses to live in. And the perception of the planning authorities was that in order to preserve the architectural fabric of these buildings, that they would have to allow the houses to be converted for office use. So all of these houses along here are all substantially in offices. There may be one or two people living in the very top floors, but otherwise they are vacant. I mean, Merrion Square in a way is the great dead Georgian square. It's like a mausoleum. The middle classes deserted the city. They moved to the suburbs, way outside the city centre, to get away, I suppose, from poverty and all the rest of it. And as a result, there is simply almost nobody living here now.
This is Gardiner Street, which is essential in the works of James Joyce. We're standing outside the Jesuit Church of St. Francis Saviour, which figures in both Ulysses and in the short story Grace from Dubliners. It's in this street that we meet at the beginning of the Wandering Rock section. The Superior, the Very Reverend John Conmee, S.J., who resets his smooth watch in his interior pocket as he comes down the presbytery steps. Just 5 to 3. Nice time to walk to RTE. What was that boy's name again? Dignam, yes. Very dignam and just best. Brother Swan is the person to see. Yes, Mr. Cunningham's letter. Oblige him if possible. Good, practical Catholic, useful at mission times. Then he goes on, at the beginning of the next paragraph, a one-legged sailor, swinging himself onward with lazy jerks of his crutches, growled some notes. He jerked to a halt outside the convent of the Sisters of Charity and held out his peaked cap to the Very Reverend John Conmee, S.J., for alms. But Father Conmee, knowing that his purse contained but one silver crown, blessed him in the sun and passed on.